All right. Well, I'll just welcome everyone here today on behalf of the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition. My name is Angela Redmond, and I am the Assistant Director for the Grazing Lands Coalition. I am joined today by Michelle Michelson, our Office Manager, and Ann Dvorak with the World Wildlife Fund has helped organize this workshop today. And it is made possible that through a grant that the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition received through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So at the end of our webinar today, you'll have a chance to fill out a survey and provide us some information for reporting purposes. It's completely confidential. So if you could take time to fill that survey out, we would greatly appreciate it. For those of you who are not familiar with the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition, we are a nonprofit organization in Nebraska that focuses on providing voluntary technical assistance and educational opportunities to producers on grazing land management and land stewardship. We believe that healthy grazing lands translates directly into forage for livestock, habitat for wildlife, and clean water for the Great Plains. The Grazing Lands Coalition offers many programs throughout the year. Some of those include building capacity to combat invasive shrubs, traditional summer grazing tour, young adult ranching for profit, and generational transition workshops such as this. Education on farm and ranch succession is what brings us here today, and it is especially an important topic right now as the age of producers is on the rise, with 60% of producers being over the age of 65. In addition, it's estimated that only 50% of producers actually have plans in place for the next generation. One of the reasons that number is so high is because producers never plan to retire. Unfortunately, we don't know what the future holds for us. So that is why we are taking time to encourage everyone to plan this week and putting on this webinar. So I will turn it over to Ann Dvorak now with the World Wildlife Fund to introduce our guest speakers.
Thanks, Angela. I woke up this morning excited to talk about conflict resolution, which I'm not sure I do that every morning. So I hope you're just as excited about this as I am. Today we get to hear from three different people, and although they're different people, they are all working together towards a generational transition plan. And through their storytelling of kind of how they got to where they are today and where they're planning to go in the future, they are going to be sharing some tips and ideas and ways to healthily resolve conflict. And sometimes when we talk about conflict, we think of it in a negative light, but it's actually very healthy to have conflict as long as it's managed in a healthy way. And so I'm not going to spend much more time talking. I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter here in a minute. But I did want to mention that how this is going to run is we are going to first hear from Pete, and then we are going to hear from John Wagner, and then we are going to hear from John Simmering, each kind of telling their story. And then at the end of all of that, we are going to take questions. However, if you're like me, sometimes the question pops into my head while they're speaking or presenting. And then by the time it's time to ask questions, I've forgotten that question. So if a question pops into your mind as someone is speaking, feel free to put it in the chat box, and we will just come back to it at the end after everyone's presented and ask those questions. So you can put them in the chat box, or at the end of the presentations, you can also come off mute and ask questions. We are set to run it about an hour. However, Pete, John, and John have agreed to stay longer than an hour. So if this happens to go past 1 o'clock, feel free to hop off if you have other things you need to do. But if you want to stay and listen and ask more questions, we can facilitate that past the 1 o'clock deadline for today. So that's a little bit of logistics. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, which is Pete Ferrell. Pete has worked at the Ferrell Ranch, established by his great-grandfather in 1888, basically all his life. He was a full-time ranch hand from 1974 to 1980, and then he served as a general manager until 2017. In 1995, he co-founded and was president of the Tallgrass Prairie Producers Cooperative, a rancher-owned business for marketing forage finished beef. And in 2003, he assisted in the formation of the Tallgrass Beef Company, LLC, owned by Bill Curtis of Chicago, Illinois. He is the initiator of and primary landholding member of the development of the Elk River Wind Farm constructed on the Ferrell Ranch in 2005. He worked as a project development consultant for Energy for Generations, LLC, which is a wind power development company. Pete served for 30 years on the board of directors of the Land Institute, which is developing a revolutionary approach to farming by breeding a polyculture of grain-bearing perennial crops. With ranch operations now in the hands of the next generation, Pete devotes his time to mentoring and teaching regenerative ranch practices. Take it away, Pete.
Well, thank you, Ann. As I'm listening to that, it sounds like that guy can't hold a job. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, really? I mean, so I appreciate that very much, but I probably should have shortened it.
No, I think it's great to see the diversity of your background. I
Well,
appreciate that.
you know, I think that one of the points I'm going to make is that I do have an abundance of interests that have helped me with this transition, but that's kind of beside the point right now. I'll start off with a couple of observations. One is that nobody's getting out of here alive. It turns out that the death rate is hanging right in there at 100%. It's 1 to a person. You don't have to wait in line. So that's a sobering fact. The second thing I've noticed is that nobody enjoys planning for a time when they're not around. So, but really the question that comes up is, what do persons of my generation really want? And if we can focus on what we really want, we can move through this difficult decision of our lives. Probably one of the biggest decisions of our lives is what's going to happen after we're gone. So I'm going to share ranch history briefly, quickly, from 1888, when the ranch was founded, to 2017, when we had the benefit of John Wagner coming here. As mentioned, the ranch was founded by my great-grandfather. Kind of a classic rags to riches story. Father was murdered. His mother died shortly after. And he, man, he puts it together. He generates a lot of assets within his life. Then next in line is my my grandfather. The ranch sold horses to the cavalry up through World War I. It has a deep and colorful history. But my father, who was born in 1907, saw the Dust Bowl, the Depression, and 2 world wars. Of those things, I think the one that impacted him most was the Dust Bowl. He could not stand to see soil movement. So, so in 1968, I had a front row seat on a failed succession plan. And at that point in time, my father was 61. He woke up one day to find out he was not going to inherit the ranch that he had worked on his entire life. In spite of this heartbreak, he carried on. He did not think that ranching was going to be viable for me. And he openly said that. He had an MBA. But I kind of fooled him, I guess. I went away and got a lucrative degree in anthropology. That's a bit of a joke if you understand that no one has a lucrative degree in anthropology, but it did help me. My college education helped me with critical thinking. So I came home in 75 to a fractured ranch, or excuse me, in 74. And I think my dad saw my devotion to the place. And in 1975, he says, "Do you want to buy it back?" Because we'd lost over half the ranch. And I will share with you that a young person should think that over pretty carefully, because I did not understand the consequences of quickly saying, yeah, sure, let's buy it back. Because, he had the MBA, and I thought, well, he knows what we're doing. And I honestly thought he was probably going to live forever, which was a huge mistake, because he died in 1980. And that was the year that my first payments came due. So I went through 5 years of living the life of a carefree cowboy, probably some of the most carefree days of my life. I was working for $250 a month plus room and board, and I thought I had the world by the tail. But then the day that I had to write a ranch check, I had to grow up pretty fast. I was 27 years old, and I had an enormous debt that I did not know how to service. So, in fact, on the day Dad died, I don't think I'd written a ranch check. I was pretty darn naive. Now, I must say, and every young person maybe listening to this, you have people that will help you. And I have a long list of people that helped me, starting with bankers. I joined Kansas Farm Management, which helped me compose balance sheets. Then the breakthrough was in 1987. I went to my first Ranching for Profit school. Stan Parsons became my personal mentor. And eventually I joined something called Executive Link, which we'll refer to in a moment, but it's an adult education program for alumni of the Ranching for Profit school. So I quickly figured out that I was going to need to lower my debt. So I lowered the number of cows we owned, and I went into custom grazing pretty heavily. Again, Stan Parsons showed me, thankfully, how I could service my debt. And that was a big formula to understand the difference between economics and finance and how they interplay. And I give him great credit with helping me understand the burden in front of me. By 1999, I had paid down the first portion of debt of the ranch that I had bought. But then, like an idiot, I went through a divorce and I had to buy that again. And the other portion came up as well. And so I doubled down in 1999, and I now owned the entire ranch that my great-grandfather had put together in 1888. I'd put it all back together. But I was facing, pretty significant struggle. I was leasing a lot of land. I was making my payments, and then I had the opportunity to install a wind farm on this ranch, which significantly helped me manage this debt. That's a sidebar. So in 2004, I'm going to show a slide here, if I may. I'm going to show my screen. Here we are. In 2000, and this is a concept that Stan had really drilled into us, which is the idea that we need to separate. Can you all see that? Stan said we really need to separate ranch management, what we do on the ranch, from land ownership to understand. And so this is what I did in concept. What you're seeing here is what I put in place. First of all, economically, if you think about the balance sheets of each of these two businesses, now appreciation of land does not show up on the ranch management ledger. So you can't be fooled into thinking you made money just because your land got more valuable. You either made money or you didn't from your management decisions. And in 2004, I started writing a real check from the management company, which is Ferrell Grazing LLC, to the landowning company, which is the Ferrell Ranch LLC. I decided I was going to see if I could really write that check. Stan said, if you can't pay the rent on your own land, then you should rent it out and get a job. And I wanted to make sure that I could do that. The other thing is that my two children, I don't like to call them children, they're adults now, but they both they were interested, and I wasn't sure if they were going to come back. But I wanted to make it clear to them that you don't get a management position here just because your last name is Ferrell. And so by creating a ranch management company with positions and job descriptions, et cetera, then it was really clear that, that this is a professional position. And if you want it, and again, if they had wanted it, I would have asked them to buy in to the next generation grazing company. I would have asked them, I was going to ask them to put skin in the game, real skin in the game. So I launched that company and I kept it intact all those years. My children, Jacob and Lauren, chose not to go into the ranching. They are fully launched with successful careers and families of their own. Couldn't be happier as a parent. But so now the next big event is in 2000, and I'm going to stop this. So the next big event for me is when I turned 60. And I realized, I realized that I was no longer doing the right thing for the Ferrell Ranch, that I literally needed to fire myself as CEO of Ferrell Grazing because certain management things simply weren't happening here. And my executive link board would probably have agreed with me. So I started in 2012 looking for my replacement. I went to Executive Link. I told them what I was going to do. It took me about 5 years to find somebody that I felt was qualified, and that person turned out to be John Wagner. I also, in about 2015, I employed the services of a third-party counselor and coach in the form of John Simmering. And he has developed a career helping family businesses in the process of succession. And quite frankly, I didn't understand what he was all about at all for quite a while. I felt like it was kind of a black box that I just couldn't get my head around it. But the beauty of this is that John has created, being a third party to all of this, he's created a climate of trust and safety that allows all of the stakeholders, myself, my family, John, his wife, our employees, we're all part of this matrix that has made decisions that have allowed us to move through this together. And I credit Dr. Simmering with helping me discontinue what I would call parent speak. And so we actually started this process before John Wagner arrived, in which I learned how to talk to my own offspring, adult to adult. And we continue to have monthly meetings as trustees of the Ferrell Ranch. I'll conclude by asking the participants a series of questions. And these have come up. I didn't understand these questions when they were asked of me. In fact, the first few questions John Simmering asked me kind of drove me crazy. He says, "Yeah, what are you ready to let go of?" And I said, "Hell, I just spent my whole life putting this thing together. I'm not letting go of anything." But he persisted. And what he was really talking about was letting go of power, control, and authority, which is damned hard after you've been doing this for decades. And I'm sure anyone my age will understand the dilemma. Our egos get wrapped up in all of these quote unquote accomplishments. And so that's step one is, are you ready to let go? And I have encountered many people my age who are not ready to let go. And unfortunately, they're going to pry that ranch from their cold, dead hands at some point. I mean, they're going to carry it all the way to the grave because, that's the way most ranchers retire. So, and so what will you grab on to was the other question he had for me. And that's been an interesting thing to discern because I am a classic workaholic. I think that's an unfortunate requirement of someone in my profession. But I did find so many things that I want to do as I have let go of this. The other thing I'll say is that it has been, I'm going to share another slide here just briefly. I'm so proud of this. Let me find the right one here. Share. Let's see if this will come up. Yeah, there it is. There is pretty amazing alignment between the successors in this process. My two kids drafted this mission, vision, and strategy statement. So this is how the Ferrell family trustees operate. We start each of our meetings reading the statement, and then we ask, are we remaining aligned to this mission, values, and strategy? And wonderfully, independently, John Wagner and his wife have come up with a separate vision statement. And my point in sharing all of this is that for the outgoing generation, which is me, and actually, it's actually Jacob and Lauren are the incoming generations, which are Jacob and Lauren, and John and Brandy, are aligned. And I think that as we talk about this transition, I have great comfort in seeing how these mission and vision statements align. But anyway, they drafted that, and I'm really, really happy with what they came up with. Then finally, we got to make it real. A person in my position can always say, oh, you're going to have this, you're going to have that. We'll do that sometime down the line. But it got very real for John Wagner and I when we put blue ink on real legal agreements. We started by rewriting the operating agreement for Ferrell Grazing. We designated him as president. And as we moved through the years, it became obvious to me that he had the talent needed to manage that company. And so we entered into a buyout agreement several years ago. And right now, he is a majority, 97% owner of Ferrell Grazing. I'm 3%. And as of next year, I will be completely bought out by John. So blue ink agreements are really important. The other half of that is that John and I, Ferrell Grazing and the Ferrell Ranch, have a 5-year rolling lease. Again, it really does matter to put these things down in writing and to say, here's what we're going to do to create clarity and certainty about what's going forward. I'll end my portion by saying I couldn't be happier with how things turned out. I had no idea where this journey was going to take us when I began it 10 years ago. But again, bottom line is I found an amazing successor, and we had a lot of help from a third party in coordinating all this to the present.
Thank you, Pete. Next, we get to hear from John Wagner, kind of picking up where Pete left off. So John grew up in rural Arizona, where he was exposed to several different trades in agriculture. He worked for a while after high school, then was accepted into a ranch and feedlot management vocational program in Texas. When he completed the program, he worked and attended college in Colorado and Wyoming, where he obtained a bachelor's in rangeland ecology and watershed management. From there, he was accepted into a 2-year apprenticeship program with a ranching operation in eastern Colorado. He stayed 2 additional years as the ranch foreman before applying and being hired as the COO for Ferrell Grazing. After several years of filling this role, he became CEO of the company and began the process of buying out the business.
Yes, thank you, Ann. So, as stated, I come from Arizona originally. I did not. My family was not full time in agriculture. I grew up around it, but did many other things too as I was growing up. And my dad was born onto a ranching operation in Idaho that was in its 3rd generation, and due to a lot of unplanned circumstances and succession gone poorly, he lost that operation as a child when his parents passed away when he was young, and had a profound impact on him and the rest of his life, having that happen at that age. and you know, and just like everybody here in the room is seeing just several examples of that, where a lot of it being, you know, where you have a 50-year-old kid working for their 80-year-old father, and and you know, they end up late in their life before they ever even have a chance to begin to buy out the operation or take over management decisions. And it's just it's always a tragic thing to see happen, and so much, you know, opportunity lost. And you know, and there's obviously there's a lot going on both sides of that arrangement with with the incoming generation and the outgoing generation, and the just the level of communication and intentionality needed is real. And you know, it reminds me some of um, uh, what you know, there's some studies done in the past where they talk about different stages of life, where people are professionally and personally in some regards, where, you know, in your 20s you're really just learning, and in your 30s you begin to really start to apply what you've learned, and by your 40s you're able to actually start to maybe profit from, or you know, gain wealth from all that time. And but with the way our minds work, men especially, women are wired a little bit differently. But by the time we get to 50, we really have to start to think about how we're going to mentor others, and start to make room for those, you know, that next generation to come up, and bring in those new ideas, that new line of thinking, while still being there and available as an advisor to bring all the wisdom and experience that they've had gained over, you know, over their lifetime and career. And so it's just that really strikes me as, you know, really paramount in all of this. And you know, so as Pete already explained, you know, we got here. I got here and began working with Pete and as his hired manager. And you know, we were. I wasn't even really looking for a way into ownership in production agriculture. I did and still have, my main long term intentions are to actually go out and help others in kind of a coaching or partnering sort of a capacity, and just business development and strategic planning and that. And so I didn't really have a desire to necessarily start an operation of my own or buy one out like we did. As we went along though here, and we were building on what Pete had already set a foundation for, I seen a lot of value and potential in actually retaining, you know, gaining ownership of that, and continuing to build out, you know, what we have here, to use as a model and an example, or you know, a learning place for our, you know, those longer range, bigger goals that we have. So it it became apparent that there was opportunity there, and so, you know, when we made that decision to buy out the business, it was been a long process, you know, that we'd started early on. And of course, wouldn't have been possible without John Simmering helping us along the way, as Pete has said, and keeping us vulnerable, and you know, talking and working through and understanding that tension is important and chaos is part of it. And you know, you have to be very open to unexpected outcomes, and that's definitely, you know, you know, where we find ourselves now. Once my wife and I made the decision that we would buy out the remaining part of the company, you know, we had to really sit down and evaluate what the business was currently doing, from my management and Pete's ownership, that, you know, relationship, that structure that existed before, to where we had needed to be moving forward, with the change in ownership and the change in, you know, just circumstance. And and so, as Pete mentioned, the first thing we did, and we were in kind of rough shape that year, pretty rough shape. We had a pretty rough year financially. Um, and I won't get into that too much. That's a different topic, really. But we weren't, we were in a rough spot with being a little too diversified, let's say, and not really focusing on one thing or one or two things very well. And so with that, we sat down and we had a gentleman that we knew who was came in and consulted for us, and we spent 3 days working on really the direction that we were trying to, the direction, not specifics around enterprise mix, but the direction we're trying to take the business, and came up with a mission and vision, and a lot of insight into what needed to happen, and that was just so critical, and I think important to anybody coming up to and moving into that transitional period, or somebody who's bootstrapping it. But either way, getting some clarity around where you're trying to go, and get everybody on the same page is just really critical. As I already mentioned, some of the things that I guess that I've learned along the way is, there's a there it is important, just as Pete said, that you need to set you need to set goals, you need to set timelines, and you also need to be open to the reality that there's those unexpected outcomes that are going to come with it, and you have to, both sides have to be prepared to be malleable, and work with each other to move forward, because it's not going to be the straight line path that you had in mind, and it takes a lot of compromise, and a lot of adaptation to work your way through these transitions, and it's so it goes down to being basically firm but fair, in a lot of ways. I mean, there needs to be a firm agreement in place. It can't be, someday this will all be yours kind of a deal. But you also have to be realistic, and fair, and recognize how complex a process like this is, and so many things that we just didn't think of at all when we started, and so you can only really plan a couple steps ahead at a time, and just work towards that that end goal. um, yeah, and the topic around power, control, and authority, that too is that is always a challenge, and it doesn't all happen at once. As those three components, they're it's a it takes time, and that was probably one of our biggest challenges, in my mind, was defining that, and everybody being aware of what they had. I mean, as far as who has the ultimate control, but who has actual, but who also has the authority to make decisions, and being able to hash that out, and get clarity on that as you go. That's a really important topic to cover, and keep fresh in front of you, and on your mind as you move along. As Pete also said, there are people out there that want to help, both the generation trying to find their next thing in life, what they're going to retire to, or what they're going to move on to, is critical, and then also people that are willing to help folks like myself get a start. And I've had several, obviously Pete being a major one, along with John Simmering, and others along the way that do want to help. And the way I think it's important to say, the way you find, or way those folks find you, or you find them, is not to wait around for help. Because I think that's you've got to absolutely take make yourself valuable. Learn the skills and have the capacity and knowledge needed to be valuable to somebody, like I was able to be for Pete when I came here as a manager. You've got to go out and find it and find a way without without maybe sitting or not sitting, but patiently waiting on the sidelines that to find somebody to come along and help you, because that's just I do see some of that with some folks wanting to see some program or something to change, and some something external or outside your in your circle of concern versus in your circle of influence. And the big thing is to really just build that circle of influence, and as you do that, then there will be folks out there that will see that and will provide some of that help that everybody needs and gets, and that's one capacity or another in their careers. So I think that's probably everything I have to say right now.
Thanks, John. I have lots of questions for you later, just so you know. I hope everyone else is thinking of some good questions for these gentlemen too. Okay, we're gonna let our last presenter present, and then we'll get down to the questions. John Simmering, PhD, has been a practicing licensed psychologist since 1985 and is the founder and principal of Kairos Consulting and Counseling, LLC. He has been a leader in recognizing the importance of living assets, people, and nature, and in perpetuating the survival and growth of individuals, marriage, family, communities, and organizations. He has served as a teacher, mentor, organizational consultant, business owner and manager, and therapist during his career. John was raised in an entrepreneurial family in Oklahoma, the son of a rural physician. He earned his bachelor's and PhD in psychology from Oklahoma State University. His work with family firms has been instrumental in building strong families, competent leaders, and better individuals. John's expertise and background bring sound leadership principles and a living system perspective to clients and team members. John lives in Heston, Kansas with his wife, Molly, and they have 3 adult children and 9 grandchildren. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you, Ann. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
It's good to be here. I find this conversation inspiring. I find Pete Ferrell and John Wagner quite inspiring, what they're trying to do in the world. In your industry, I don't know y'all, but if I knew your story, I would probably find it inspiring. It's really good. It's just a good journey to be on for our world, what y'all do, what you're about. So good to be here. I'm going to share a couple pictures with y'all. Can y'all see this picture up on the screen?
Yes.
Yes. As you heard Pete sharing and John sharing, they were talking about a process over time. They were talking about complexity. They were talking about it's not so black and white at times. It can be quite emotional. Conflict is necessary. Trouble is inevitable in anything that's growing and trying to find a way to flourish. So we began the process, and we live with these things we call the 4 commitments, and it becomes a norm in the work together. Pete, John, and myself, and other stakeholders in the process, we always kind of begin and keep in mind this is our commitment to each other. First commitment is be present. Nowadays, that's not an easy thing to do. Put down the phone. Really be present to yourself, your own self-awareness, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Really be present to the other person, That's what we call empathy, empathic understanding. It really takes some intentionality, take a deep breath, but that we've been committed to that since the get-go. Some days better than others. Be safe, committed to being safe in any process of evolution, of change, transformation, growth, transition. You know, friction is necessary. I would say conflict is necessary. Sometimes debate, argument, different strengths. But how are we committed to creating safety around that? We can have difficult conversations in safety, personal respect for the other person, again, empathy for the other person's perspective. So be present, be safe. The third one is be willing to speak your truth. Be willing to speak your truth. Everybody has truth. A lot of times we don't speak our truth. What will people think? How will they react? But we're really committed to going to say it. I can't say it, I can't say it, I can't say it. I'm going to say it. And we're committed to creating safety around that. It's okay. And remember too, we all have our truths. Nobody has the truth. If somebody's telling you the truth, be careful. But when we're all willing to speak our truth, the bigger truths appear, things we couldn't see before. Be present, be safe, be willing to speak your truth. And John mentioned this, be open to unexpected outcomes. If we stay committed, if we stay safe, if we stay present, we stay speaking our truth, usually bigger unexpected outcomes show up that we couldn't see before. But in the process of collaboration, we do that. So anyway, that's kind of the commitments we roll with. I'm such a facilitator, it's hard for me not to say, well, does that make sense? Any question? But we'll save that for later. I'm going to share another picture with you. That's what we call the messy pictures. Can everyone see that? I'm sorry, it doesn't fit better. Can you see that, Ann?
Yeah, I think if you go to your top right, do you see where it says like zoom in or zoom out? I think you could zoom out a little. So, yeah, then we could, yeah, whoa, there, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This is one way, if y'all would imagine, you know, your ranching enterprise, your economic enterprise, your business, it's a system comprised of different parts. Really, it's what we call a complex adaptive system. And these different parts in the system, just like in your prairie, you have these different parts to the system that are generated in a business system, like a ranching enterprise. We have these different parts. See, you see where it says family. We have, Pete was talking about family, John Wagner was talking about family, great-grandfather, John's father, the multi-generational families where stories, patterns of behavior, things that are okay, not okay. We have the blessings and the curses of family, right? Family is something we're dealing with from cradle to grave. As we say, family is the primary influence in our lives, our personalities, questions we have, things we struggle with, patterns of behavior. Family is with us lifelong, for better or worse. So you see the word out there says heal. And heal is just an old word that means to make whole. And ideally in the family, we're interested in the wholeness, the healing of all the individuals within that family. For like Pete said about his adult children, Jake and Lauren, they're autonomous, independent, adults out in living their careers and dreams and families of their own. They're healing and they're connected. And they have provided us this tremendous mission and vision for Ferrell Ranch LLC. Family, that's a part. You see another part that says ownership. Important to think about ownership as a distinct part, has its own responsibilities, its own commitments and expectations. You know, what's a reasonable return on our investment? What's our capital commitments? What kind of culture do we want to see lived out? What kind of values are important to us? What's our multi-generational plan with our ownership? It's a distinct part. All right, you see the word next to it, lead. That's where the lead, not management lead, but lead. How do we keep the system alive in a way? Then you have the part where it says advisory people, advisory, like your accountants, your lawyers, your ranching for profit, executive link, strange people like myself, all engaged in the system. They're part of the system. Ideally, they are aligned and serving that mission vision of the ownership primarily and helping the operations company. You see below where it says implement, helping that company develop the strategies that are in alignment with the high level plan of ownership. Isn't that a nice picture? Everybody like that? It's so clean and nice, differentiated parts. You see down here, can you see the marker where it's that word there, that strange word says phonergement condition. Phonergement condition. This is a word I invented a number of years ago, but phonergement condition is where there is no clear differentiation, boundaries between the role of family, ownership, or management. It's typically a dysfunctional ego mass. So no clear boundaries. When is this a family issue? When is it an ownership issue? When is it a management issue? It's all tangled up condition. And it generates a lot of anxiety and tension. Sometimes it explodes, and it's normal. Every multi-generational enterprise will go through a period of phonergement condition. I diagnosed Pete Ferrell with an acute case of phonergement condition many years ago. It's normal. And that's that pressure that builds up within a system. The ranching industry is particularly vulnerable, as you all know, to phonergement condition as I talk about it. So the work, the process really is how do we, with respect and safety and support and trust, sort of separate, differentiate these parts of the system so we can value them more wholly and become a more robust, adaptable, and resilient kind of system going forward. That makes sense. I hope that makes sense. It's normal to experience that. It is courageous work to differentiate that. And so, as Pete said before, John Wagner even appeared on the scene, Pete was working on phonergement. We spent a lot of time with his adult children and his spouse and the family. Let's start there. Let's heal as best we can. And then Pete further, then his work on the plan, as you heard him describe, and separating the operating companies from the land ownership and things, really worked on that. So those parts were more differentiated by the time John was ready to enter the system. And it's interesting if you look on the sort of the left-hand side, I think it's your left-hand side of the system of these interacting parts, the ownership and the family, that if there's no work put into that and you just really put a lot of energy into the operations and strategy, management plans, strategic plans, all of that, it usually kind of goes nowhere. It's just miserable. It's just miserable, any kind of business. But if you put the energy into and clarity and alignment into the family, and I'm including John Wagner is not excluded from the family part. As John shared his story, anytime we join a system like this, we bring our own family right into it. Those stories and patterns that are, we're projecting our own family into any kind of system we join, if that makes sense. But if we do our work over there, if we have clarity there, family and ownership, the right-hand side gets a lot easier, a lot easier. It becomes doable. So it's, I guess what you hear me saying, it's so important for the ownership to have a plan, for ownership to be understanding, as Pete said, where do I need to let go? Where do I need to take hold? Sometimes for Pete, for example, it was really letting go of operations. As Pete likes to say, getting somebody smarter than me in there. Got to let that go. That was his life for decades. It was not easy to let that go. And for Pete to really take hold of this left-hand side of the system, the land ownership and the healing, Pete letting go of ownership of the operating company, John Wagner willing, able to take hold of that. So anyway, that's one way of thinking about it. People find this picture useful into just understanding the parts a little more clearly. We all intuitively all know this. We all feel it. Family, ownership, management, so to speak. Anyway, I'll share one more picture with you. I can look at, oops, yeah, here we go. Another thing we looked at and acknowledged people find useful. I call this the big four of family systems. And I would say can y'all see that okay? Somebody say yes.
Yep.
Yeah, if you boil down a lot of family systems theory to kind of get it down, boiled down kind of simple, this is what I call the big four. This is me boiling it down. But people find it useful to stay grounded that whether it's a family business or not, it's still a family business. As I said earlier, everywhere we go, we're bringing the psychological blessings and curses of our family. We are a hyper-social, hyper-familial species. As I said earlier, we're dealing with it all our lives. So let's just be really conscious of it, consciously aware, and being able to talk about it and differentiate it. As you notice when Pete and John were sharing, Pete's father, grandfather, very present in the story. As John Wagner was talking, his father, very present in the story. Like that's okay. It has a power in it. And we're all somewhere on that healing, becoming whole journey, our own person apart from that. So the big four: family is the primary influence in our lives. I talked about that earlier, lifelong. It serves us well to really be consciously aware of that. When am I unconsciously projecting my family experience onto this business situation, management, whatever? Number two, patterns do repeat from generation to generation. We have a psychobabble phrase for that, the multi-generational transmission process. But we inherit these patterns of behavior and kind of psychological rules, like what's okay, what's not okay, what we do with emotions, how you treat people, that we're typically not consciously aware of, but they move along. A lot of times, one of the things that moves through the generations is trauma, that and adapting to trauma constellates particular behaviors, and it gets passed along long after the trauma is way in the past. So anyway, conscious awareness of patterns. Number three is change is constant in both horizontal and vertical. What I mean by that, change, we're constantly changing our horizontal plane. We're getting older. We're going through different developmental stages. You heard John Wagner kind of talking about the developmental stages of adulthood a little bit, from 20s, 30s, 40s, so on. But there's also this constant change of vertical change. You can think of this kind of like we used to call a generation gap, that our worldviews are constantly changing, and the gap is often widening. And it's important to be, again, consciously aware, like the world view, the vertical changes between Pete Ferrell and John Wagner is significant. They grew up at different times, like different worldviews. It's not wrong, not all right. It's not either or, but how do we talk about that and understand more about those, and again, create a greater whole? The fourth one, probably my favorite of the big four: separation and connection are both vital to optimal family health. It's so important that we separate from the family. We develop our own identity, our sense of autonomy, independence, and being able to connect as an adult. You heard Pete talking about that process, so ongoing. So anyway, those are a few of the sort of guidelines, images that are guided our process. There's a lot we could talk about. I realize I'm out of time, so I will stop there. And I believe we are open to any questions.
Thanks for sharing that, John. Yeah, I do want to open up for questions. If you're participating and you need to hop off at 1 o'clock, feel free to do that, but also know that this is being recorded. So everyone that registered will get a copy, or will get the recording in your email. So you can always hop on and watch the questions at the end if you do need to go at 1 o'clock. But if you'd like to stay and listen to the questions and ask questions, please feel free to stay. We'll hang out here for a little bit and go through some questions. So I do have some questions in the chat that we'll start with those, and then we'll go from there. Jack asked a good question in the chat about to Pete and I think John Wagner. I would be interested in both of your perspectives on what skills you would recommend someone develop who is wanting to start their own operation or make themselves marketable to an owner operator looking to transition the operation. Additionally, what resources would you recommend to develop those skills?
Yeah. I would, I mean, I'd say a lot of what we've, John Simmering specifically has been speaking to here, in this whole issue of just communication and conflict resolution and, working through, the challenges that will come when two different people or groups come together to try and work together. I mean, I'd say that that's big. Having that, having that capacity or growing that muscle, it's pretty unnatural for some of us. I know it certainly was for me. It still is. So, so I mean that's certainly a skill. I guess that'd be maybe what would be classified as a soft skill. As far as some of the hard things that um, definitely, economics and finance are two of the economics, finance, and HR. I mean, are really where you've got to get things right to begin with. You got to be able to manage and work with your people. You've got to understand how to run a cash flow in the business, and know what know what economic drivers are that you have. So getting those three down first, and then and then moving out from there into some of the more supporting roles that hinge off of that. I'd say are major. There's lots of resources out there. I mean, there's lots of good, easy access to a lot of ideas, information. I think John Simmering says a lot there. The world is awash with information and short on knowledge, and that there's a lot of information out there, and you can get overloaded with it. But it's just finding mentors, finding advisors, finding facilitators like we have here, in this organization that really help to put some meaning behind it all. Ranching, Pete will speak more to this probably, but I mean, we're big in for programs like Ranching for Profit, Executive Link, as far as some of those harder skills go.
Thank you.
Yeah, John covered most of the bases there. There is one addition I would make to this. When I decided to fire myself and find my replacement, I did not place a conventional position wanted ad. I issued a request for management. Excuse me. I issued a request for management proposal, and in doing so, the respondents had to tell me how they would manage this ranch. So, and what I was looking for in that kind of response was, does this person have critical thinking skills? John Wagner aced it. It was immaterial whether he was accurate in his responses. What mattered to me was seeing that he had critical thinking skills, that he could adapt to a multitude of situations that would come up in his tenure as a manager. And so that's just about the only addition I would make to what John said. Again, he already mentioned there's a lot of places you can go for the hard skills, the soft skills of people and emotions. And I will add to that, and I realize you look like from your question, you're wanting to be marketable to an owner operator, but to the persons of my generation, I want to say that one of the things that really helped me was to always remember what I was given when I was in my 20s. And that helped me understand what John Wagner would need as he moved forward. So I was really reflecting on what were the factors of security that I needed to move forward, and can I provide those to the next generation? What do they need? What do they want?
Thank you very much.
Next question. Can you give us an example of a situation that came up and how you worked through it? I'm thinking like maybe an example of like a conflict resolution. Can you think of an example and how that was worked through that you're willing to share?
Um, yeah, I don't know, Pete, you got one that comes, I could draw on something, I suppose. Uh, I'd say that, when we made um, when my wife and I made the decision to buy out the company, as I mentioned, we were in kind of a tight place at that time as a business, and we seen it as in with the change of ownership and the change in realities that we were going to need to change or make some major changes within the business, within the enterprise mixes. We needed to drop some things that we were doing and start or grow others. And and even just the rewriting of the we had a mission vision statement prior to the change in ownership, one that we had worked on together when I first arrived here. And anytime, I mean, when we were under the distress that we were at the time as a business, plus the newness of us of new ownership coming in, Pete was still and it still is a partner in the business, still supporting us in different capacities. And I know it was a lot for Pete to absorb at that time. That there was some reluctance and around some of the changes we were considering, and so we worked through it, and I'll maybe ask Pete to chime in here, from his perspective on it. But from our end, it took us understanding that that resistance to some of those changes and ideas, where was not, it wasn't a personal attack on us or our capacity. It was just it was it was much, it was more of a, yeah, it just wasn't a personal, it wasn't something personal, and it was challenging not to take it personally. But that's what it was for us, to us. So
Yeah,
Pete.
I would agree that that was a major point of change when John took ownership. And as I think through that time, it turns out I've been playing the Pete Ferrell show my whole life. And I don't know how to not play that. And so what it really took it was for me to understand, literally, it's not my business anymore. To literally look at the pickups, the livestock, the equipment, and say, you know what, Pete, this is not yours anymore. This is John's now. And that seems kind of silly to even say it out loud, but it's the truth. And that's what I literally would say to myself every day. This is no longer yours. It's his. And that helped me. I hope it helped me shut up when when it was appropriate for me to just keep my damn opinion to myself, because I literally worked for John when he became, well, even as he became owner, and that's an awkward twist of roles. But again, I would remind myself, what do I really want? What I really want is for he and Brandy to flourish. And if I want that, I need to stand down and shut up. And not easy for me to do. I'm a highly opinionated person. So that's kind of how we worked through that. And I appreciate John and Brandy's patience with me.
Well, and I would say to that though too, for that, I mean, Pete was beginning, had to, but prior to that and during that time was making that transition. Before, it was all what he said was all technically true, because Pete was still a partner in the business, and he was still helping us to secure financing to operate the business. So he was, I mean, he was in a difficult, that'd be that makes it even more difficult. And the reality was that he still had a stake at the table, but he had to begin shifting his thinking around that to over the course of time to be able to fully get there. And that I'm sure will be very hard for me when my time comes. So
I want to add a point that is so critical. And part of this separation from management of the ranch to ownership of the ranch is having kind of looked at this a lot. I'll just say it. I think it's immoral for each generation to expect the next generation to buy that land, because the land will suffer and the people paying for it will suffer. And so, I really think that that's a key ingredient to what we're doing here, is that John has the security of ownership of the management company, and he also has the security of knowing that he has the land to operate on. And again, as I reflected back, what did I have? Well, that's what I had, and that's what I want him to have.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete. I have a question from Alex. Alex, can you come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me, Ann?
Yep.
Great. Thanks for this presentation. It's wonderful. I'm just curious, a lot of the folks that I run into that are struggling with this transition, succession step, they're the younger generation trying to take over or move into ownership, or at the very least management. And Pete is obviously very motivated to see the land and someone else succeed him in a productive way. But the challenge I often see is that older generation, as Pete started talking about, won't even engage in the conversation of the reality of their inability eventually to manage. And I'm just curious if these guys have ideas of how people could actually bridge that gap with an older generation that doesn't want to talk about it.
I'm going to run in on that, Alex. That's a great question. And if I could do one thing, if I could share one thing with people my age, if they could see, and again, I get really energetic about this, if they could see how much someone like John Wagner has improved this ranch in his tenure here, they'd let go in a heartbeat. In fact, I've often shared with other people, I really wish I had started when I was 50, not when I was 60, although I wasn't ready. I get it. I was not ready. But this ranch has blossomed under new management because new thoughts came in. I'm always playing woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's like, well, John did this amazing thing. Why didn't I think of that? Well, the truth is, I didn't think of it. John thought of it and he implemented it. And if my generation could see how much these ranches will benefit from bringing in new thought, new energy, new ideas, it blows my mind. It just blows my mind. And that's why I'm literally so happy to see how well the ranch, I've been able to witness this incredible change in my life. And that's, I don't know how to get that message across to my generation. I don't know how to share that.
I think about that, Pete, and that's a really good question, Alex. And you started by talking about how there's 100% death rate, like we're all going to die someday. And I think the question is like, when you take your last breath, right? what do you want to have happening here? Like, can you envision what's happening on your ranch when you take your last breath? Is it dead like you are? Or is it alive and well with new ideas and new things going on? Because I think that puts it in perspective. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of folks who pass on and it is dead, right? Like there's nothing happening on that ranch because they haven't transitioned it successfully.
Yeah, I know. I will occasionally, you know, in a hallway conversation or over coffee, I'll bring it up with some of my associates, and either they will, 1 in 10 will engage. The other 9, their eyes glaze over and they change the topic. You know, they're just really, and I understand it's hard to talk about, but there's definitely an upside to moving through this. From what I've seen on the Ferrell Ranch couldn't be in better hands. And that's the point. Did we get there easily? No, it's taken me 10 years to get through this. So.
And I think the important point is we're not through it. And John Simmering says you're never through it. I mean, we're still in the middle of it. There's no destination or anything. I mean, it's just a constant, it's a constant journey. And I would say, and again, some of this was already said before, but along these lines that, one of the reasons I think that this is such an issue for ranchers to let go to the next generation is they have nothing else to go to. Their whole identity is that they're, 4th generation rancher or whatever, fill in the blank. And they don't have an identity or any, ambitions or anything outside of what they're doing. And so that, again, I don't know how we're really answering the question here. How do you get them there? But that's, I think, a really big part of it is just that identity out of work. And that's something you got to start, the sooner young folks can start that, the better, because I know even, I mean, for me, that's really a challenge. And I, having something else, having a person, an identity outside of what you're doing to then go to, because they know what happens if they just retire and do nothing. And they don't want to speed up that 100% death rate that Pete's talking about. So.
I think, could I speak into this one too?
Yeah, John.
I think a lot of times with the older generation, as a phrase, like my generation, a lot of older adults in the ranching industry appear to be holding on like it's kind of some selfishness or something. But in my experience, usually they're stuck in what we call despair. The sort of the developmental task late in life is, how do I look at my life? Can I look at it with integrity, or do I look at it with despair? And we get stuck. And so, like John Wagner, the only thing we know is this damn ranch. And then we think it's my legacy, and it's not. They could discover, but so sometimes the rising generation needs to bring healing. Doesn't need to wait and try to get them to do something, but sort of bringing that consciousness raising, conscious awareness, consciousness raising, that there can be a relationship. You can find joy, that you can help them find what a real legacy is, which really is mostly in relationships. So many families carry a lot of pain and isolation, and they're cut off, and right. So yeah, just thinking about consciousness raising, like it's okay. If I can tell another story on Pete, because we're doing this publicly, Pete. But Pete, like, he had his, holding on to that land no matter what, and over my dead body, and like they would Pete would not think of his legacy that way, I don't think. Not what I've been hearing you say, Pete. It's in like wanting to see these people flourish, John and Brandy flourish, wanting to see the quality of your relationship with your adult children and your grandchildren. Now that's a legacy.
Yeah,
right?
my grandkids don't know me as a rancher or ranch manager. They know me as grandpa. That's what I want, you know.
Right. So I guess we say we just all need to help having those conversations and awareness. There's hope. I think that's probably why Pete and John and I are doing this today, is just to say, there's hope. You really can do this. As difficult and sometimes painful as it is, there's joy hidden in this pile of manure.
Kara has a question in the chat that I want to make sure to get to. In the beginning, you mentioned that there's separation of land ownership and business. And she's asking about the transition of the land ownership and the business. Like if you could explain that transition a little bit, Pete.
Yeah. Well, as mentioned, John Wagner now owns the management company that leases the Ferrell Ranch. Again, this is technical legal stuff, but this entire, all the land holdings have been put in trust. Jacob, Lauren, and I no longer regard ourselves as owners. We refer to ourselves as trustees. And because that vision statement is really important to us, because instead of having a third party land trust, we regard ourselves as the trustee of this property. And to, you know, what I'm wanted to engender in their minds was, how do you want to perpetuate this as yours? But again, we intentionally do not refer to ourselves as the owners. We are the trustees of this property. I served on the board of trustees of a community college. I was on the board of directors of the Land Institute. And those roles helped me understand what it's like to care for something that I don't own. And so if there was a skill that my generation might learn to develop, it's give service. And again, that's one of the things I've been able to go to. Even though I'm not on the Land Institute board anymore, lo and behold, I've been asked to serve on 2 additional boards since I departed that one. I love that kind of service. And it's amazing what I continue to learn. But that's the issue on the land ownership. Yes, it has transitioned, but not to any individual. It has transitioned into a trust. Technically speaking, it will be financially foolish for any future trustee to remove that land. It'll be taxed heavily. So I have some certainty, just because of the financial constraints, that the land will remain in the trust, because like I said, it would be not wise to pull it out and sell it. Did that answer your question, Tara?
I wonder if she's still.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Good.
One question that was back up a ways is, are there differences in the types of conflict that come up for generational transition within a family versus transition that aren't within family?
I think John Wagner and I, and maybe John Simmering, we have noted, I think it's, I can't speak from experience, obviously. I think it may be easier to transition management of a ranch to a non-family member. Of course, I admit I wanted Jacob and Lauren to consider this, and they did. But I think it's easier because John Wagner and I simply don't have the family baggage that would have come with that. That's my opinion. I don't know. I'd love to hear what John Wagner and John Simmering have to say.
Yeah, I think Pete's right. And from others that I visited with that are in the process, you know, of keeping it within the family and doing the transitions. You know, there's just all that background of family conflict and unresolved conflict and that parent-child, you know, dynamic that just adds more challenge to it. Where with Pete and I, it was more of a you know, profession sort of level conversation. There's certainly, as John Simmering said, there's that vertical gap and differences in generations and world perspectives to work through. But you'd have that on top of family on top of family dynamics if it was family. So I do believe it is more challenging and more important to be even more intentional and have someone like John Simmering or you know, just get really well versed in how to work through those.
I've often wondered, had my father lived, how would the transition have gone? Well, we're Irish, man. We like to fight, and so I miss him every day, but I kind of wonder if he hadn't just died on me, would I have been allowed to make the decisions I made? As it turns out, they were the decisions that allowed us to survive. But I mean, I sold my dad's cow herd. I mean, that was his cow herd that he developed over decades. I had to lower my debt load. And so I did. You know, and it wasn't even easy for me at the time, but you know, would he have gone along with that? I don't know.
Couple of comments I'll make on this one is, yeah, it's more natural, normal in nature that a multi-generational business like a ranch is not managed by family members. It's more unusual for family members to stay in management roles. And, you know, just the likelihood that family members would have the same calling, vocation, purpose, alignment, very rare. What I often say to next rising generation family members in a business, kind of like Jake and Lauren, that their greatest contribution to this mission, the purpose of the Ferrell Ranch, won't be as managers, it'll be as owners or trustees, stewards of this. That's where families can really do that. So yeah, it's more normal it's more unusual for a multi-generational business that's flourishing to have family management. But again,
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions? I want to leave space if anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question. I have a question. Well, I have lots of questions, but I will keep them to just a couple if no one else has questions. So one question that I have is you talked about, Pete, you talked about alignment when you were talking about the vision statement and that there was alignment between you and your children, and then there was good alignment between you and John. I guess my question is like, what happens when there's not alignment? Like, what happens when maybe there's a sibling that isn't in alignment? And this kind of ties in a little bit to what John Simmering was talking about being present, being safe, being willing to speak your truth, and being open to unexpected outcomes, like being on that same page and in alignment with how we operate and work through conflict, but also in alignment of like, what's the vision for the ranch? What happens when there's not alignment? Like, what suggestions would you have for working with family members when there's not alignment?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that, except that I will tell you that there was not alignment in 1968 and things fell apart. The wheels came off. that's the only experience with that I have. Now, John Simmering and John Wagner may have other experience. I mean, right now, because John Wagner and his vision for Ferrell Grazing is very much in line with Jacob and Lauren's vision for the Ferrell Ranch. I see great alignment in the next set of the successional folks. But I can't speak to what happens. I guess I'd personally be very uncomfortable if that alignment was not there.
Want me to share a comment, then we can share a story. You'll know what story I'm talking. A lot of times when we say lack of alignment or conflict, or like a sibling or whatever, that lack of alignment or conflict is typically not what we think it's about. It's not even what they're saying it's about. But it's a way to whether it's this vision or whatever, or strategy or business thing, it's a way to communicate that I'm not okay with this. So sometimes in a family, it is what's not being said could be like, I'm feeling obligated that I have to do this. And I really want to be a piano teacher, but you want me to be here on this ranch. And so but they haven't said that. So it goes back to the importance of, I said earlier, the process. We have a process that we can stay in conversation about this and get to what it's really about. That makes sense. And that just takes time and staying with it, creating safety, really being present to each other. Do you know what story I'm thinking about, Pete?
Well, you're probably thinking about recyclables.
Of course, it's always recyclable.
Yeah. Yeah, my son and I got in a fight over who had jurisdiction over his recycle container. And it really wasn't about the recyclables at all. It was about me not honoring his authority. I mean, that's really what it was about. And that was very enlightening. I mean, I kept saying, we've talked about this. You said we could use and Simmering kept saying, it's not about the damn recycling. It took me quite a while to get that through my head, but it's like, oh, this is about me honoring his adulthood, his position. It was, and I failed to do it, but it was. And the other thing I'll say, if we were doing this in person, we did it in Beaumont a couple of weeks ago. John Simmering would probably hand a rope with me on one end and John Wagner on the other. And we're pulling on that rope. I'm pulling one way, he's pulling the other. And we've grown, I won't say comfortable, but we understand the necessity of that tension. I'm still here. I'm still hanging around. And we just know it's there. And I'm okay with it now. In the past, that would have bothered me, but now it's like and there's tension between me and Jacob and Lauren. I'm sure it's there. It's going to be there. And getting comfortable with that discomfort has not been easy for me. I have a great job description for anybody that's interested. Read my mind, do it my way. That's a typical rancher way to look at it.
I was laughing to myself because I don't know anyone like that, Pete, actually.
Yeah, I bet you don't. Every rancher I've known does it that way.
Okay, any last questions while we have these three on the line? It's been such a treat to have the three of you in the same room and sharing your stories.
I'll just, growing up on this ranch, it is laughable that anybody would have ever said, Pete, what do you think? You know, nobody ever said that to me. Not once, not ever. You know, it's like, oh, that's what I grew up with, you know? And I didn't think it was unusual. You know, it's just, it helped me understand my role here, but it doesn't work through adulthood, that's for sure. So.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, let me double check chat just to make sure.
Oh, Angela just asked about the wind farm.
Yes.
It was 1,000 to 1 long shot. I got lucky. How's it affected the operation? Prior to the wind farm, I was leasing quite a bit of additional acreage, paying rent on other ranch land that helped me make my payments. So when the wind farm came in, I didn't have to have that extra land. I didn't have to work so hard. It brings in about half of the revenue for the Ferrell Ranch. The other half comes from Ferrell Grazing. And at the end of the day, it gives me and my successors certainty that we can continue paying this large amount of debt. The Ferrell Ranch is still in debt, paying for all the land I put back together. But it's been quite a blessing. The family received it well. The community struggled with it. At this point in time, it's pretty well accepted in this community, but I know it's a hot topic all over the country. So, Angela, does that kind of, do you have any additional questions about that?
Well, I have to apologize. Some stranger just showed up at my door, and so I stepped away for a minute. But I think we're, I think that you're hitting everything. So I don't have any additional questions. So
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks, Pete. Well, on behalf of Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition and on behalf of all the participants today, I want to just take a minute to thank Pete and John for taking time out of your day to share with us your experience and your story. When Angela and I first started talking about doing a presentation, she asked me what topics I thought would be good to cover, and I said, how about we talk about conflict? And I think she was like, oh, Anne. But she went along with it, and it's not easy to get folks to get on a webinar and want to talk about conflict and the tension, like you talked about, Pete, that is natural and exists. And so I'm very, very appreciative to the three of you for sharing with us today. And again, taking the time to do that and taking the heart space to do it as well, because it's not an easy topic to share on. I will turn things back over to Angela so she can talk about, we've lost a lot of people, Angela, but hopefully we can still get some surveys.
that's okay. We will email the surveys out and the documents. We can also share the documents that Pete, that you shared out with everyone, and when we email them the follow-up survey. So I did just put our information up, the Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition's website's right there. You can scan that QR and it'll take you to our website if you want to check out other events that we have going on. But yes, I would like to just thank Pete, and John for joining us today, and for Anne for her help putting this together. Greatly appreciate it. Look forward to hearing everyone's feedback on the Michelle did, I see, put that in the link in the chat there. You can also click on it and do it right now. So I just appreciate everyone's time today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.